Okay. So last week we started talking about Agile, and we looked at this diagram, the level of detail of planning when it comes to Agile projects, starting from the product vision, which is it's a statement that talks about what the product is about, why we're creating the product. That's product vision. Then we talked about product roadmap, which is a 1 year plan that's broken down into several quarters. Then we talked about release planning. Now, each quarter can be a release, and each quarter you are releasing some features into the product. Then we have iteration planning, and then we have daily planning. Now, so we also looked at this. You can see your release planning, right? Your release planning is here. And in each release, you have your iterations. Iterations are fixed periods of time that you create certain features. So, and what do I mean by features? These are pieces of functionality within a software or an app. Let me give an example of a feature. So when you log into your banking app, even logging in is a feature because it does something. When you log into your banking app, logging in is a feature. Transferring money, that button you click to transfer money is a feature. So each iteration in our project creates certain features, and a number of iterations will be gathered together to release some features. So that means that this release is the sum total of all the features that will be executed in the iterations. Now, there's something you need to notice that we have features and we have something called user stories. User stories are a way of describing features in a software. And let's look about user stories. So it's a short, simple description of a feature told from the user's perspective. That's why it's called user story. It's like the user telling you the story of what they want to achieve. So for large, more complex work, we call them epics. So you could say that several user stories create an epics. Now, how does user stories work? As a role, I want functionality so that business benefit. As a role, I want functionality so that business benefit. So when we talk about user stories, we are looking at a way of describing features from the user's perspective. Let's look at the example here. As a customer, I want my credit card information to be stored so that I can save time when checking out. So look at the functionality. So anytime you're creating a user stories for anything, you first of all talk about the stakeholder that is going to benefit from that functionality. So as a role, as a customer, as an administrator, I want functionality so that I can have a benefit, business benefit. That's the structure of user story. So let me give you an example of the user story. So as a customer, as a bank customer, I want to be able to transfer funds, that's functionality, so that I can send money to others. That is the benefit. As a as a customer, I want to be able to, as a bank customer, I want to be able to transfer money so that so that I can send money to others. Of course. So anytime you're talking about user stories, there's a format. One of them is you first of all state the role. As a role, I want this functionality so that I can get this benefit. That's our user stories. And again, user stories are used to describe features. When you're building features in an application, you can describe those features by user stories. So that's why we're talking about user stories. Now, let's look at an example where we've combined everything together. So we have this example that talks about the product vision, then the product roadmap. Remember, it's a 1-year plan. Then in the roadmap, you have the releases, and each release is made up of iterations. Iterations create features, right? So everything that we've seen, we're just going to look at an example so that you get an idea of what we're saying. So let's look at the product vision. In a rapidly evolving world, our vision is to create and innovate an innovative, sorry, our vision is to create an innovative learning management system that empowers individuals and organizations to embark on a journey of lifelong learning. We envision a platform that transcends traditional education boundaries, fostering a global community of learners, educators, and administrators. So, very simple. It's telling us what the product is about, creating a learning management system. Interestingly, this is possibly the product vision for sites like Coursera or Udemy, right? Because they're both learning management systems. So let's look at the product roadmap. So the roadmap is made up of releases. So the first release is basic functionality, and each release is made up of, let me see, I think three, let me check. Each release is made up of 4 sprints. No, 2 sprints, 2 iterations. So each release in this project is made up of 2 iterations, and sprints are also known as iterations. So for the first release, we have 2 sprints, sprint 1 and sprint 2. In the first sprint, 2 features will be made: user account management and content upload and module creation. So that means that if you look at it as user story, look at the user story for this feature. As an administrator, I want to be able to create and manage user accounts. As an administrator, I want to be able to create and manage, I want to be able to create and manage user accounts. So that you can see the feature and the user story, content upload and module creation. As an instructor, I want to upload course content and create modules. So you can see that. So when we talk about the features, you see that they are better described by user stories. And user stories of features, right, are found in the sprint. So in the first release, we have 2 sprints, which means the first thing you're going to release to the public are the fact that an administrator can create user accounts and instructors can start uploading the modules they've created. That's what we're saying. So, of course, it goes on, but I think I don't want to bore you. I just want you to see the structure of how this project would have been executed, starting from product vision to the product roadmap to the releases. So release 1, basic functionality. Okay, I think each release has 2 sprints. Yes, okay. So sprint 2, you can see course registration and access, basic analytical dashboard, right? So the first release will give all these features 1 to 4. Now, the reason we call it release is that is what is going to be released to the public. That means all this, when they are built, make up the first release. That means that's the first thing that your customers will be able to do, these 4 features. And in And the reason why the first release is important is because that the first release is usually your minimum viable product, which is now being called minimum marketable product, right? MVP. And once you release your MVP, you can start making revenue. You can start generating revenue on your MVP. And that's why, it's very important to to try and to try and build fast when it comes to agile projects. Most startups use agile because they can start small, start generating money with their MVP. And that money they generate from the MVP can finance other releases. That's the whole idea. That's why most startups start small, grow very fast, because they will start with some basic functionality. You can see in the first release, we have basic functionality, user account management, content upload and module creation, cost registration and access basic. This is the basic functionality which makes up the MVP. Once they can create this, they can start selling courses on the learning management system. And the money they make from the first release can be replowed, can be reinvested in other releases. So this is why you need to, when it comes to agile projects, the motivation for speed is so that you can create your minimum viable product and then reinvest the money back in building other features in the product. So that's the whole idea of agile, and that's why most startups prefer agile. Yeah, Mr. Peter, go ahead.
Good morning, please. What's MVP? Sorry, I lost
Minimum
track.
minimum viable product.
Okay, thank you.
Minimum viable product. So let me give an example of MVP. When WhatsApp started, their MVP was a chat functionality. When WhatsApp started, the minimum viable product was that I can message you, you can message me. And it was good enough to release to the public. That's what your minimum viable product is. You don't release something when uh, all you can do is log into the website and there's no other functionality. You can't say that's a minimum viable product. But when you have some people that provide value to a customer such that they can even pay for it, that's when we're getting to the minimum viable product. Because back then, SMS messages cost money, right? And you know, it was a lot cheaper to message people with things like WhatsApp. And of course, it wasn't WhatsApp that started it. BlackBerry, when a lot of people started using BlackBerry, and there was a BlackBerry Messenger. It was just an innovation to the way we used to send messages, right? And through mobile devices. So that's it. So I'm going to continue, and we're going to talk about agile characteristics. So we've talked about communication. Face-to-face communication is the most effective and efficient way of communicating. Agile believes in collaboration, team members collaborating with one another, collaborating with stakeholders in order to define and work on the project. Agile is iterative. When we talk about iterative, it means that we keep on refining the project, refining it. Now, let me explain what I mean by refining. Um, so sometimes you might look at an app, and after some time, you just see that they've changed their homepage, or they've changed a button. It used to be blue, now it's green. Or like what's update some time ago. There's a time they changed their background. That is refinement. Iterative leads Hello, please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Apologies, I don't know what happened to my Wi-Fi. I'm so sorry. It didn't used to do this before. I'm so sorry, please. Okay, I was talking about just a minute, please. Okay, so um I was talking about iterative, what iterative means. And iterative is the same thing as refinement. How will I put it? Iterative is, imagine you are sketching something, and the more you sketch it, the more you review it and modify what you're sketching. That is iterative development, which means over time we keep refining what we've done. And I gave an example of WhatsApp changing, modifying their, what do you call it? Their their background after some time, or modifying a button, refining the button. So that's what we call iterative. It's a repetitive way of refining a product or a feature. Incremental, on the other hand, is talking about increasing the functionality over time, increasing the functionality over time. Now, let me show you an image. So when you talk about iterative, it's about refinement. You can see what I mean by refinement, right? Keep refining something until you get what you want. That's iterative. It allows you to move from vague idea to realization, from rough to polished. But incremental is about increasing the functionality. So when you're on agile projects, you do iterative and incremental at the same time. Sometimes you might be focused on iterative alone. And the example I gave is, you find a feature in WhatsApp, maybe a button, and it used to be red. Then the next time they release it is now blue. That's iterative, which means they are refining the same thing. But incremental is, you find a functionality that was not there before. So I just pick up my WhatsApp, and all of a sudden I realize that I can share my screen. It wasn't there before. It's a new functionality. So incremental delivery in Agile is adding more functionality. Iterative is refining what I've already done before in another cycle. So that is, and I think this picture does the job. Unfortunately, it's in my well, I've changed that now. It used to be in my Scrum. Scrum is Agile project management. So this is from my Scrum slides, but I think this picture does a lot to explain it. And if you are doing both incremental and iterative at the same time, you can see the last one here, where we're doing some parts iteratively, doing some parts incrementally, and you can see that it's working together. So that's why I decided to take time to put those slides in. So you get the picture in your mind. When we say iterative, what does it mean? Iterative is refining what you've done before, you know. And if you sketch something, you find out that after you sketched it, you now start refining the sketch. That's iterative, right? Incremental is adding more functionality. And these are common concepts in Agile, right? Iterative and incremental. Then empirical process control. When we talk about empirical process control, it is the backbone of Agile. Empirical process control is the backbone of Agile. Agile is built on two concepts: lean, which is um, lean, which means reduction of waste, and empirical processes. So this is one of the backbones of Agile. And what does empirical process control? Sometimes people call this empiricism. Sometimes people call this empiricism, right? And what does empiricism mean? Empiricism is a concept that says we learn best from our own experiences. That's what it means. And the three pillars of empiricism is visibility or transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And what do these three pillars mean? So first of all, for us to be able to manage an empirical process, there has to be visibility or transparency in the work. So what does visibility or transparency mean? Let me give an example. Now, visibility and transparency is something we talk about in knowledge work. And the reason is simple. Knowledge work is work that is done in people's mind as they think, which means that when developers are coding, they are doing knowledge work. And and knowledge work is difficult to see unless you can open the person's mind. But unfortunately, we can't open people's mind and keep them alive, right? So we need to find a way to make knowledge work transparent. Now, what's the opposite of knowledge work? Industrial work. What's industrial work? Work that has to do with um, moving things, construction, oil and gas. That's not industrial work, right? Now, industrial work is transparent. You don't need to make it, you don't need to talk about transparency when it comes to industrial work. But knowledge work, you need to talk about transparency. So, what is in industrial work? What's an example of transparency? So, imagine that you have a bricklayer, and that bricklayer, you sit in front of the construction site, you get a chair, you sit down, and a bricklayer is walking. Now, you see the bricklayer go to where the blocks are, goes into the building, lays it, comes out again. You know, you can see the work. It's transparent. If someone says that the bricklayer is playing, you say no. I can see him. He's working. His work is visible. But if a developer is sitting in front of you, you are facing him, and he's typing, you don't know what he's doing because it could be playing a game, it could be writing a song, it could be doing 1 million things. So that's why when it comes to empirical process control, transparency, because it was created for knowledge work. How do I know what this developer is doing? That's where transparency. So for Agile to work, one of the backbones is that work must be transparent. And I'll explain how that is done. Inspection. Now, the work that is transparent is what you can inspect. If the work is not transparent, there's nothing to inspect. And when we inspect and we find out that we can, we can improve it, then we make modifications in doing so. Now, I'm going to give you an example of something we consider as an empirical device, and that is called a thermostat. Thermostats are considered empirical devices, right? So how does it work and how does it fall into empirical processes? So what does a thermostat do? A thermostat regulates the cooling temperature within uh, within a space, right? So how does the thermostat work? In terms of visibility, you set a temperature. and maybe you set your air condition to 16 degrees Celsius. So that is what the thermostat is seeing in terms of visibility. So what does the thermostat do? It will inspect room temperature. We'll check the room temperature. Let's say the room temperature is at 20 degrees Celsius. Then it will adapt. It will tell compressor to keep on working. So you can see visibility, inspection, and adaptation. Visibility, we have a clear temperature that the air conditioner has been set to. The room temperature, when we inspect the room temperature, we find out it's 20 degrees Celsius. Then we adapt. Adapt means we tell the compressor to keep on working. That's the thermostat's job. So the thermostat does empiricism, which means there has to be a clear vision. Then you inspect and you then you adapt, you adjust. Now that thermostat will keep doing this regularly until the temperature in the room is 16 degrees Celsius. Then it will tell the compressor to stop compressing. So that is what we mean by empiricism is about inspection, visibility, inspection, and adaptation. One more example to drive home the point. When you're baking a cake, right? Of course, when you want to bake a cake, you are going to see the maybe the recipe or the cookbook. The cookbook is transparency or visibility because that's the target we want to achieve. So you might see a lovely cake in a cookbook, and they put all the ingredients and instructions. That is visibility. The work we want to do is visible. Then what do? After you mix the cake, put it in the oven. From time to time, what do? You inspect, you check. Is this cake rising well? Is this cake coming out the way I think it should? And then what do? You adapt. You say, okay, let's turn down the flame or turn up the flame. That's it. That's empiricism. So in Agile, empiricism is as simple as visibility, inspection, and adaptation. So when it comes to visibility, it's simply stating what each developer is doing in the project by using a, 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 a chart. So each developer will state, this is the work I'm doing. I'm working on the login feature. And that makes his work visible. That's where you have boards. That's where you have boards in agile projects. Each person working on a feature, you see the name beside it. So you can know what work they are doing, right? So they deal with boards, they work with boards, they show what they are doing so that you don't have to guess, oh, what's Peter, what's John working on? Just go and check the board and see John is working on the login feature. That shows visibility because now the work to be done is now put on paper and put on sticky notes on the board so that we can now check what each person, that is the concept of visibility in Agile. Agile is about driving value and continuous improvement. So these are characteristics of Agile. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about an agile mindset. What is an agile mindset? Last week, we talked about the 4 values of agile. The 4 values, that's the agile manifesto. People and collaboration over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. The 4 values, right? Customer interaction over contract negotiation. And the last one is about change. Let's just look at the Agile Manifesto again. Responding to change over following a plan. So that when we talk about the four values here, we're talking about those four that we just saw. Then the principles, these are the 12 principles, right? That's the one we said our highest priority is to, that comes immediately after the the manifesto, the 12 principles. So that means that to develop an agile mindset, you have to really understand, right? You really have to understand the four core values, let's call it the core values, and the 12 principles. And there are many practices that have been designed based on the four values and 12 principles. And that is what we have in terms of Agile, and a number of practices follow the four principles and 12. And that is what we call Agile. So when you have an Agile mindset, you have a deep understanding of the four values and 12 principles. And that is what we're talking about here. So Agile is an umbrella name for a number of practices: Scrum, Extreme Programming, Lean, Kanban, RUP, Crystal, DSDM, and FTD. Now, don't worry, you don't have to know all of them. In fact, we're just going to talk about a few. The most popular out of the Agile framework is Scrum, and we're going to focus on Scrum in this training. Now, why are we grouping them together? Because they have similar characteristics. All of them for the four values, the Agile Manifesto and the 12 principles. That's why they are together under Agile. And of course, if you want to look at their relationship, just think about ice cream. Of course, we all know what ice cream looks like, but we also understand that ice cream has different flavors. Now, when you look at ice cream, you see the main characteristics of ice cream. It is creamy, it is cold, and it is sweet. Now, anything that looks cold, creamy, and sweet, we normally call it ice cream, right? The only thing that now changes are the flavors. So Scrum, Crystal, Lean, they're similar in the four values, core values, and 12 principles, but they are different in practice, slightly. They change differently. So, like I said, we're going to focus on Scrum, and Scrum is the most popular. The reason we're focusing on Scrum is because Scrum is the most popular framework. Scrum is a time box centric framework, which means Scrum believes in fixing the time to deliver features, right? And is the most popular of the agile methods. Kanban is perfect when it comes to visualizing the workflow. Kanban is perfect in visualization. It is used for knowledge work. Why is it used for knowledge work? Because knowledge work is hidden. It's in the person's head, the way he's thinking about, and working to build a solution. And Kanban focuses on reducing the work in progress and uses a just-in-time pull system. We also have feature-driven development, where everything is driven by the features needed for the system. So these are just some agile frameworks. Let's look at why we're focusing on Scrum. So in the agile industry, we can see here 56% of 56% of people that use agile use Scrum, pure Scrum. 10% use a hybrid of Scrum and XP. 6% use a hybrid of Scrum and Kanban. So that means if you add all we have, 56% plus 10%, that's 66% plus 6%, you find out a total of 72% of people of companies, we're not talking about people here, of companies use 72% of companies use either pure Scrum or a hybrid of Scrum. And that's why we're going to focus on Scrum because it's the most popular Agile framework. And once you get Scrum, you can just interpolate it and see the similarities in other frameworks. Okay, so let's talk about XP. XP is one of the Agile practices. XP stands for Extreme Programming. XP um, is an agile engineering methodology, which means that when it comes to applying XP, you must understand software engineering to a degree. Now, this is one of the reasons why XP is not popular. Only 1% of companies use XP, right? In XP, customer works very closely with the development team to define and prioritize granular units of functionality, which they refer to as user stories. So in XP, we use user stories. And of course, we've explained what user stories are. They are the description of features from a user's point of view. And the development team estimates plans and delivers user stories in the form of working tested software on an iteration by iteration basis, which is typically between 1 to 3 weeks. So when it comes to XP, the team will discuss with the customer and start creating user stories. Don't forget, user stories are the description of features that the team is going to build. And their cycle for delivery is between 1 to 3 weeks. So when they're using XP, the team will sit with the customer and they'll ask, okay, what features do you want to create? Then they'll convert them to user stories. Then they start building the user stories based on the iteration those features fall in. And that's what XP is. Now, XP has some values which are common to a lot of agile practices. And the first value we're going to talk about is simplicity. One of the values of XP and agile in general is that simplicity is the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. It's a principle. It's one of the 12 principles. I think number 11, principle number 11 in the part of the 12 agile principles. One of them is simplicity is the art of maximizing the work that is not done. Simplicity means do only what has you've been asked to do. Don't do more than you've been asked to do. And I'll give you an example. So there's a particular project ongoing, and the developer saw a user story to create a login feature. And he created the login feature. Now, based on his experience, every login feature needs authentication, which means, right, okay, some, not every. Sometimes you log in and they want to be sure it's you, and they send you an email, and then you can confirm it's your email. So, what did they ask him to do? Create a login feature. If he wanted to do more, he could have also created an email authentication that to show the user that they've signed up, right? And he could have done that, but he said since they didn't ask him to do it, stop. But guess what? What they wanted to do in terms of authentication was to use uh, telephone authentication, which means that instead of getting the authentication through your email, it goes directly to your phone. So what if you had just gone ahead and assumed? That's why in Agile, we say simplicity. Keep it simple. Do only what has been requested. Do only what is needed. Communication. Communication is another value. It's also in the 12 principles. Everyone is part of the team. Face-to-face communication is the most effective way to communicate. Feedback. Being able to get feedback from your clients and stakeholders early is good. Now, this is why we have short cycle times of 1 to 3 weeks. If I'm working on something and I can quickly get feedback, I know what to modify and adjust, right? Rather than I've been working on some for 3 months, and by the time I show the client has so many feedbacks, I don't even know how fast. But if I'm getting feedback from the client every 1 or 2 weeks, I can modify better and adjust to what the client needs easier. Another value is respect. This value is an agile value. I mean, it goes all the way. Every team member deserves respect. Why? Because your team is self organizing. What does self organization mean? It means that they self manage. Now, if a team member does not feel that they are respected, they won't give their best. And you don't have a fully functional team because one person is just lagging behind. One person might feel that um, people don't listen, they are not respected, so they don't contribute. And funny enough, some of those people may actually have the solutions. So every team member deserves respect. Every team member deserves respect because that is where you get the full value of a self-organizing team. If one person doesn't feel they are respected, they won't contribute. They won't. And let me tell you the story of how they started building elevators outside a building. The most elevators, when they started building elevators, it was inside the building, right? That means you enter the building, the elevators. But you see some buildings that the elevators are outside the building. And how did they do it? There was a group of engineers building a building, and they were trying to rack their brain to see where they could fit in the elevator. And it was a janitor that was sweeping and says, "Why don't you put it outside?" Now, imagine that janitor felt that, look, let me not interrupt these engineers. They know more than me, and just kept quiet. Probably we would have seen elevators outside building maybe for another 10 years when someone catches the idea. So in Agile, everybody deserves respect because that stimulates innovation, right? Everybody deserves respect. Courage is the ability to tell the truth, the ability to tell the truth and to succeed. Courage, which means if you feel something is going wrong, you should be able to voice up and say, I don't think this will go the right way. We call it courage. Then we have 12 practices. So let's look at the 12 practices. We have um, number one. Let me talk about this, then we'll go for our break. Now, some of these things are software related, but I'll explain them to you so that you can take advantage. Now, in Agile, right? There are some, you may get some questions on some of this. So, but um, I'll just explain them as best as I can and just know them. So, extreme programming has its own 12 practices. One of them is called pair programming. So, what does pair programming mean? Extreme programming uses pair programming. Pair programming means that two developers will be working on the same code. And how does it work? While one is developing the code, the other is reviewing the code. So pair programming is a form of quality assurance where two people work on the same work. One is working, the other is reviewing the work. Then after some time, they switch. The one that is reviewing the work starts working then the one that was working starts reviewing the work. That's called pair programming. It improves the quality of the code because one person may miss something out, the other person gets it, and the quality of the code is better. It's a practice under extreme programming. But the challenge of extreme programming is that, I mean, of pair programming, is that two engineers are doing the work one engineer should do. But what's the trade-off? Is better quality. Test-driven development is another XP uh, engineering practice. So you may hear something like pair programming. That's what it means. Test-driven development means that we write the test scripts before we build the product. Now, what does that mean? It just means that if you're going for an exam, the teacher has created the marking script before they've even given you the exam. Now, most times in software development, you build a product and test it. But in test-driven development, you create the test scripts first, and then the developers will build the product such a way that it passes the test. If it doesn't pass the test, they keep on refining and making adjustments until all the test scripts are passed. That's the drill. That means test goes first before you build. Rather than building, I finish building, then I start testing. Refactoring, and what's refactoring? Refactoring is where we go back to adjust the code. Why does refactoring happen? Because Agile is about speed. So sometimes, in order to gain speed, you might do some shabby work, right? Shabby work, which means you just patch. It's working, and you understand. So developers do that from time to time. Refactoring is where you go back to the code and rewrite it so that it's better structured. Now, if you don't do refactoring, what happens is that after some time, you won't be able to expand the functionality of the code. You won't be able to increase the functionality. So refactoring has to be done. Now, a simple way to understand refactoring is this. Some people I'm sure you've seen it in Nigeria, they have not finished their house. They go and move inside. But while they move inside, they are still working on their house. That's like refactoring. The code, the software is not fully ready, but because of time and speed, we just start using it, right? And when we start using it, right, we start patching, we start fixing the patches that we've done. That's refactoring. Simplicity, remember we talked about simplicity, the art of maximizing what is done. Keep things simple. Make sure that your team is working in a sustainable pace. They are not burning out. We are discussing with what I mean by sustainable pace. Don't drive your team to work 12 to 16 hours a day. Let them maintain their 8 hours a day and ensure the pace is consistent. Metaphor. When describing, when developers are talking to business people, they should use metaphor. For example, if I want to say database, for a software engineer, they understand database, but to a business person, they may not understand database. So you can use a metaphor like, just imagine you have a drawer, and that drawer has cupboard, and each cupboard has different things you store. You can use that to explain what a database is. Continuous integration. You keep on building the code, adding more functionality, and integrating the code into what we call a code base, which means, when you're building incrementally, you are adding new code and you're integrating it with the overall code that you've used to build the software so far. Collective ownership. Collective ownership means that every developer has access to the code. Even if they were not the one that developed the code, they can modify because everybody has access. Use coding standards to code. And we have the customer acceptance tests are done. You can release small releases. That means incrementally, you can release more features over time. And you can use planning games to estimate the amount of work, and the whole team is accountable for the work. So these 12 practices, there are some things you might see in a question, like two developers are doing pair programming. You should know what that is. That means they're both working on the code, or they're talking about a team is using test development, test-driven development. It just means that they are writing their test scripts before they develop the code. And the test scripts now guide the developers to know when the software is ready to go. So the 12 practices, some of them might be sound very techy, but I've tried my best to explain them in a way you can understand. Yeah, sorry I took out of our break. I just wanted to ensure that I can talk about extreme programming so that when we come back, we talk about lean. So we'll take our break now and then we'll come back in the next 10 minutes. All right. Thank you. So Agile came out of the software industry. So that's why we're talking about things like pair programming. You don't need to know software engineering, right? But if, for example, you go, you get a job as a software project manager or IT project manager, you should know some of these concepts. That's the barest minimum. We're not going to talk about coding or architecture or anything, but there are just some basic things you need to know. That's why we've talked about this. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, right? Feel free to ask. And of course, we'll use, you know, I'll explain to you if it's not clear. But I think all the principles we've talked about so far, they're clear. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate. So let's talk about lean. Lean is an iterative agile methodology which comes from lean manufacturing, and lean manufacturing is from Toyota. Now, this is the funny thing about agile. Lean, lean came from Toyota. That's manufacturing. So lean gave rise to something we're going to talk about called Kanban, and lean eventually became the foundation of Agile. Remember what I said about Agile? Agile is based on lean and empirical process control. And we've explained empirical process control, that when it comes to managing an empirical process, something we use to gain experience, we use visibility, inspection, adaptation, which means as we are building something, we learn and adapt. That's what empiricism is saying. Lean is talking about how we remove waste and how to do things faster. So the whole concept of agile came from these two things, lean and empirical process control. Right. And that's what we're saying. So lean has 7 principles. First principle is eliminating waste. So as much as possible, agile teams try to eliminate waste by minimizing the number of defective features they create, right? And ensuring that they don't waste time doing things that, that do not add value. For example, working on features that are not needed at that time is a form of waste. So 7 principles of lean. Number one, remove waste. Remove waste in our processes, the way we do work, in defects, because a defective feature is a product of a wasted time. Amplify learning. So in Agile, one of the things that we do is there are opportunities to learn and improve. One of such opportunities is pair programming or peer reviews. Pair programming, the developers will talk within themselves and learn from each other. Peer reviews is where team members just review their work and learn from each other. We also have what we call retrospective, which is also an avenue for that. Deciding as late as possible. This is when we want to make some critical, uh, critical decisions in building some features, but we want to wait till the latest responsible time so that we can get to know all the information we need before creating our feature. Delivering as fast as possible. Lean is about speed, and delivering as fast as possible is the goal in Agile. It's about doing work. Remember, one of the principles of Agile, our highest priority is to deliver value quickly and consistently, right? So it's about speed in delivering value. Empowering the team. Now, empowering the team is about empowering your people to make decisions. This is why Agile works with self-organizing teams. The way you manage people in waterfall is different from the way you manage them in Agile. In waterfall projects, is a project manager that instructs, or a supervisor or a team lead that instructs the team what to do. In Agile projects, every team member is empowered to make decisions. This is what self-organizing teams mean. Nobody tells them what to do. They take the decisions in terms of work. Building integrity in. What does building integrity in? Is ensuring that quality is factored into the way we work. Again, peer programming, uh, product reviews. We should have things in place to ensure quality is quality is factored into the way we build the work. So that's why we need feedbacks from customer. This is why we use things like peer programming. This is why we used another concept called definition of done to ensure that work is done according to certain standards. Then being able to see the whole value of the work, being able to see the whole value workflows is what we are saying in seven. So the seven principles of lean also apply to Agile. And that's why we say that Agile came out from lean. So we also have that. Now let's talk about Kanban. Kanban is a very wonderful tool, and I'll tell you, you can use Kanban in fact, Agile itself can be used in any industry. I particularly love Kanban because Kanban is a way of visualizing workflow. And Kanban has some principles, right? And I'll show you a short video about Kanban. So let's look at workflows. So let's say that you have some analysts, business analysts that can analyze 10 items of work per week. You have developers that can do the same amount of work per week, but you don't have enough testers. The testers you have can only test 5 items per week. Now, Kanban uses what we call a pull system. And what does pull system mean? It means that work is not pushed, right? And what do I mean work is not pushed? Now, what do you expect? When this business analyst has finished working on 10 items, naturally they should push the work to developers. And when developers are finished with it, so we should push the work. So this is what we call a push system. That work is being pushed to other teams. That's push system. Pull system is until a team requests for work from you, you don't send them work. That's what we call pull system. And why is this important? If we use a push system and we're just pushing work, what's going to happen is that the testers each week will have 5 additional work untested, and this will pile up. It can pile up. Let's say we've worked for 10 weeks. A time will come where 50 items will be untested. And a time will come where it doesn't even make sense doing additional work because the testers cannot meet up. So Kanban uses a pull system. Now, pull system means that when testers are finished with 5 items, they're going to request 5 items, right? So developers are not going to push the work. Then when developers are done with their items, they will ask based on the vacancy they have. So if they pushed, if testers have requested 5 items, they'll have 5 items left. They can ask these guys to send them 5 items. And when they ask for 5 items, they can equally bring 5 items from the product backlog. Okay, so we have that. We have that. So that's a pull system. And if you use a pull system, the work in progress is will be limited. That means the amount of work each team will do is under a limit. You get what I'm saying? That means the work done is limited to the number of work requested. That's what we mean work in progress is a limit. Now, let me show you a video, just a minute. And I'll also send a link to our WhatsApp group. So the concept of Kanban is to reduce the work in progress. That means minimize the work in progress based on the capacity of the team per time. And when you minimize it, you actually move faster, because if we keep pushing the work, a time will come that the bottleneck will be so much that the whole system shuts down. So let's look at, and I'm going to explain concepts like cycle time, work in progress, because there's something else we need to know about Kanban. Now, when it comes to Kanban, we actually use a board, and the board is called a Kanban board. So this is an example of a Kanban board. This pending are the workflows that have not been done. And this could be your product backlog, right? Product backlog. So you have a product backlog, then the workflow starts from analyzing items that are pending in your product backlog, developing, testing the features, and deploying it. Now, let's look at how it works. So as one item is being deployed, don't notice that the capacity we have is 3 per time. So this has gone, then we pull this. If we pull this, that means there are 4 items left. Then we can pull this here. And if we can pull this here, we can pull this. So you can see this pulls this, pulls this, pulls that. That is how Kanban works, right? If the work is not finished, don't be in a hurry to pull more work. Finish that work, then pull another work, pull another work, pull another work. That is it. So one thing you need to know, which is important and very popular when it comes to Kanban questions, is that you need to know what we call Little's Law. What is Little's Law? Little's Law is work in progress is equal to cycle time, times throughput, right? So faster cycle time, faster throughput, shorter cycle time, reduce work in progress. Everything is in Little's Law formula. So what does this mean? So how do we calculate work in progress? So work in progress is the work in your system. And how do we know the work in the system? It's the numbers on top. So that means that at a single point in time in your system, the work in progress is your system can handle these items of work. And to get your work in progress, just add up. Notice we don't add pending, because you haven't started working on assignments that are pending. So work in progress here is equal to 3 plus 5 plus 3 plus 5. 8, that's 16 items. 16 items, right? And what is your cycle time? The cycle time is your cycle time is the time it takes from an item to start into your workflows till you deploy. That's your cycle time. And for example, your cycle time could be 2 weeks. So that means it takes from the time an item enters into your Kanban board, is being worked on. So cycle time can be 2 weeks, but it could be it's actually depend on how fast you work. Cycle time is 2 weeks, right? Can you see how I'm doing it? Right. Then that means we can calculate throughput. Throughput is the rate at which we are working. So throughput, if you work on the subject of formula, throughput will be work in progress divided by cycle time, CT. And that means your throughput is what? 8 items per week. That's the rate at which your team is working. And this is, so that's why I highlighted on that these terms, cycle time, work in progress, and throughput, they are things you must know when you're dealing with Kanban. And from my own experience, they don't really ask too technical questions, right? When it comes to Kanban, they can ask you, how do you think we can how do you think we can reduce cycle time? How do you think we can reduce cycle time? That means if I want to do work faster and it's not 2 weeks, I want it shorter than 2 weeks so that things move faster. What's the practical way of reducing cycle time, right? That's a question they can ask you, right? Who can attempt now? Yeah, yeah. Peter, please go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, to reduce cycle time, probably it will reduce the throughput as well first. Not much as they mean the same thing.
Reduce the throughput, Abi.
Yes.
Perfect. Reduce. No, are you sure we reduce? Let's look at it.
Yeah.
Do we reduce?
Yeah.
If you reduce the throughput, you increase cycle time. Now, do you agree with me? We want to reduce cycle time. If we increase the throughput, we're not going to reduce cycle time. If we increase the throughput, we increase work in progress. Now, where I'm going really is the formulas. So questions you can get. Let me show you what I'm saying. So when we say cycle time and you make it the subject of the formula, cycle time is the same thing as work in progress divided by throughput. Let me call it TP. So if they say, how do we shorten cycle time? Now, if you reduce throughput, cycle time will increase. So two ways you can increase cycle time is number one, reduce work in progress. Wait, I hope I'm not confusing. If we increase throughput, sorry, Peter, you're actually right. Are you right? Yes, you are right. You're right. Yes, you're right. So sorry about. Because if we increase, yes, sorry, using this formula, I'm so sorry. You are perfectly right. So using this formula, if we increase throughput, if the denominator gets bigger, the value here, yes. Apologies for that. Apologies for that. Okay, yes. So one way to reduce cycle time is either we reduce work in progress, right? Because if work in progress gets less, then cycle time will be reduced or increase throughput. If we increase throughput, I'm so sorry about that. Yeah, you're perfectly correct. So you can play around with this formula, Little's law. So when they ask you a question, you can say, okay, should we increase throughput? Should we reduce cycle time? Should we increase work in progress? Or they can ask you, how do we reduce work in progress? Using Little's law, you could either reduce cycle time or you can either reduce throughput. If you reduce cycle time or throughput, you reduce the work in progress. Yes, that is it. Okay, so please don't forget Little's law. Don't forget Little's law. It's very important. So we have, um, so number one, we can visualize. So why is Kanban very good? It helps us to visualize workflow. Now that's why Kanban always uses a board, and the board helps us to see the work people are doing. So this is like a sticky note. And in that sticky note, they will describe the work, maybe login feature. So the business analyst is analyzing the login feature. They're trying to, you know, so developers will develop, then testers will test whether logging in is working. So all these are features, they're user stories, right? And as they work on them, analyze them, they can now develop and test before they deploy. So each of these sticky notes is a feature you're trying to build, right, into your software. So these are features. And when we work on them, we can now, move them to another stage where they are further developed and tested. It's the same work. So that and user stories will be used to describe the feature. So that's why we say you can visualize. You can visualize because if, let's say, this one says login feature, you can see the names of the people that are working on it, which helps us visualize who is doing what. So if your developers are just typing and typing and typing, and you can see what they are, you can go to the Kanban board. We can see actually what they are doing. Oh, John is just John is just developing the login page. You understand? And we can see that um, they are still analyzing it here. The business analysts are still working on it, drafting the user stories and so on. Okay, so that's it. Just wanted you to understand Kanban. Now, again, limit the amount of work in progress. Now, we all understand why, because we don't want bottlenecks. So to limit the amount of work in progress will help to reduce the bottlenecks and ensure that we do not work beyond our team's limit. Then this also enhance flow by using a pull system. That means that work is not just lying everywhere. We only ask for work that we are ready to handle. That enhances workflow. So that's a Kanban system. Let's move on to Scrum. So we've talked about extreme programming. Don't forget the values of extreme programming. Don't forget the 12 practices, and of course, yeah, that's extreme programming. Kanban is we use Kanban in my place of work, and it's not really software related. It's a good way to manage tasks. I wish I can have enough time to show you how Canva. You can use it for anything, and it's a very good way. Now, why I started using it in my office is because sometimes I don't know what my team members are doing, right? So we created a Kanban board so that I can say, oh, okay, Godwin is working on this. I can see it on the board. That's why we say it's for visualization. You can use it in a construction project too, where you know what each person is doing. That's the value, one of the greatest value of Kanban boards. It helps us to see who is doing what and what stage of work we are in. So let's go into Scrum. So in Scrum, the whole framework of Scrum looks like this. So, so in Scrum, we have a product owner, and the product owner. Okay, let me talk about the players that make a Scrum team. Number one, product owner, development team, and Scrum Master. So there are three major roles in Scrum. Now, the product owner serves as a liaison, right, for stakeholders like the customer, executives. The product owner serves as a liaison, or you could say the product owner is the voice of the customer, which means the product owner has a good understanding of what is needed in the product they are building. And therefore, the product owner is the person that creates a product backlog. So the product backlog is a list of features we want to see in the software. But the product owner manages the backlog, and it's important you understand what manages mean. Manages product backlog. And managing is more or less prioritizing, making sure the most important items are on top of the product backlog. The most important items are on top. Why do we have to prioritize the backlog? Because we are looking for value first. Now, let me explain. So when on a software project, software development is quite expensive to pay software developers to work on your project. Now, the reason we put the most important things first is so that if we run out of money, the most important things have already been developed first. The other things can come later when we make more money. So that is why the product backlog has to be managed by the product owner to ensure that the most important things are done first and they're on top of the product backlog. Now, the first event or meeting your team will have is called the sprint planning meeting. This meeting is where the Scrum team looks at the product backlog and decide what they are going to do. So items are moved from the product backlog to the sprint backlog in the process of sprint planning. Now, what the developers are trying to do is they look at how much time they have in execution. This says 1 to 4 weeks. Now, please note, developers determine the time frame is 1 to 4 weeks, but most companies use 2 weeks or 4 weeks, right? So if the time frame is 2 weeks, then the team will look at the product backlog and select items they think they can do in 2 weeks, right? If the sprint or the length of the sprint has been set to 4 weeks, most likely the work they're going to choose will be more than the work they selected for 2 weeks. Remember what we said about the team being self-organizing. So nobody can tell them you must do this 10 items. No? They will decide what they can do within their capacity within the 2-week sprint or 4 weeks. So their items they are moving from here to here is what they can accommodate within the fixed sprint. Now, the fact that we have 1 to 4 weeks is saying that you have the opportunity to choose the duration of the length of your sprint. And once you've chosen that length whether it's 2 weeks or 4 weeks, you stick to it. So you can't say that the first sprint we're doing is 2 weeks. The next one will be 3 weeks. The next one after that will be 4 weeks. So within the time of your sprint, what you're trying to do is create all the features you put in the sprint backlog. And there's another thing that happens every day during the sprint. There's what we call daily scrum meeting. Daily scrum meeting is a 15-minute meeting where team members catch up on what is going on, what they've done so far, what they want to do on that day, and the challenges they are facing. During the daily scrum, we can also update what we call the burn down chart, burn down or burn up chart, which gives us an idea of what has been done so far. Burn up or burn down chart, which gives us an idea of what has been done so far. All right. So daily scrum is done every day. That's why it's called daily. Now, after 2 weeks or 4 weeks, then there's a sprint review. A sprint review is a product demo that the product owner and other stakeholders review. So in 2 weeks, we ask the team, okay, what have you spent 2 weeks to do? Let's inspect it. Can you see the word I'm using? Let me inspect what you've done. And when they inspect, they can give feedback by which we adapt to inspection and adaptation. So sprint review is where we get feedback on the product. We give the product into stakeholders, the hands of stakeholders, and we get a feedback from them. And then we can now decide any modification we want to do. Then finally, we have what we call team retrospective. And this is where the team learns from what they have done and look at how they can improve the sprint moving forward. Okay. So in a glance, we have seen sprint. Of course, it's a little bit more complicated than how I'm explaining it. So that means we can't just say we are done with Scrum. We need to break it down. And in Scrum, you notice that Scrum is also based on empirical process control, empiricism, and you find out that there's some things that talk to transparency. So in Scrum, things that pertain to transparency are your product backlog, because product backlog helps to show the work that needs to be done. The sprint backlog are part of transparency. The definition of done. I talk about definition of done. This is like a quality criteria, definition of done. So we have that. The product backlog, sprint backlog, and definition of done are examples of transparency. Why? They show us what work is being done, and that's transparency. And the other sprint events, like sprint planning, daily scrum, sprint review, sprint retrospective, are designed to enable us to inspect and adapt the work, which is empiricism. That means the 4 events that we're talking about are actually events that give us the opportunity to inspect and adapt. And that is that's why they're important. So Scrum designed 4 events according to empirical process control. And these are the 4 events we're going to be talking about. Sprint plan, what happens there? Daily Scrum, what happens there? Sprint review, what happens there? Sprint retrospective. The 5th one is the sprint itself, right? And all these have been designed for inspection and adaptation, which means we are following the principles. So let's start talking about Scrum team. And let's talk about the product owner. What's the product owner? The product owner is the person, the product owner is the person, the product owner is the person that decides what is going to be built. That's why they call him product owner. They own the product. Scrum Master and development team. So let's look at what the product owner does. So the product owner defines the features of the product or the desired outcomes the project will bring. The product owner prioritizes features and outcomes. So they're the ones, remember what I said about managing a backlog? They determine which features are the most important, and that starts on top backlog. They adjust features and outcomes and priority as needed. They ensure profitability. The product owner is a business person. They want to maximize profit from the product they're managing. They focus more on what rather than on how. So the product owner is the one deciding what will be built, while the developers are the ones that have been assigned to figure out how to build it. They clearly express product backlog items. They order the items in product backlog to best achieve goals and mission. They optimize the value of the work the development team performs. They ensure that the product backlog is visible, transparent, and clear to all, and shows what the Scrum team will work on next. They ensure the development team understands items in the product backlog to the level needed. So you can see the role of a product owner is clear. They are the one in charge of what is going to be built. They are the ones that ensures profitability. They have to explain all the items in the product backlog to ensure that it's transparent, it's clear. The team members understand what needs to be built, right? And they ensure development team understands. So the developers, if they need some explanation about the future, product owner gives that. All right. So that's the role of the product owner in Scrum. Now, I want you to wear the hat of a product owner now. I want you to wear the hat of a product owner. And just imagine Meta has employed you as a product owner for WhatsApp. So now don't forget, product owner is a business person. They ensure profitability. Now WhatsApp has like, is it 2 billion or 1 billion people? And Mark Zuckerberg says it's time to make money from this. Of course, they're making money, but imagine you're the product owner. Now, they have so many features, right, that we're enjoying for free, in quotes. So if you are the product owner of WhatsApp and you want people to pay for some features, which features do you think people will gladly pay for? Which means a service a feature that is a feature that you're currently using that people will not mind paying for. Yes, let's think about it. Rhoda, would you like to try? If you are the product owner of WhatsApp, which features will you monetize? Rhoda, Peter, which features will you monetize?
I wasn't really following this.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay, Peter, go ahead, then I'll explain to Rhoda.
Okay. Well, for WhatsApp, well, on a lighter note, anyway, for me, let it be free. But as
Yeah,
it is,
yeah.
they should not try and inconvenience us anymore further than this anyway. But that's on a lighter note anyway.
Don't
But
worry, they won't
as a
care what
business,
you're saying.
person, I will, okay, the one I would really monetize, I think that will do well, monetize the video calls and the private settings.
Okay.
So I feel people that want to go into private settings,
Mhm.
really, they actually need it. So that's the one I
Okay.
would.
Okay. I like that private setting. But you see, remember, product owner is a business person. If
Yeah,
we start charging money for video calls, what do you think is going to happen?
yeah, there'll be competition anyways, definitely. So
But
to
you
that
know that
private setting, really, people may really won't just want to do that.
yes, private settings, I agree that. But that video, you know what will happen? You know it's free. So
Mm.
people will now look for other free services and
Yeah.
migrate there because
Mm.
nobody wants to pay money. So the value has to be strong enough to
Yeah.
drive us to say, okay, for video call. If I want to call you, I don't need to see your face. I don't want to spend extra money. You
Mm.
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we might push people to Telegram. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the
Oh,
so the yes,
telecom, Telegram. Oh, yeah.
yes, there's video call on Telegram. So if you monetize it on WhatsApp, you just see people gravitating, they'll be using Telegram more because there's video call there. So that one
True.
is good. That one, private setting is good. Yes. So the reason I'm asking this question is product owners are not necessarily tech people. They are people with business acumen that knows, okay, let's put this feature, let's see how it performs. Let's see if people like it. That's a product owner. They know enough about tech, maybe through the apps they have, but they're not necessarily tech people. They are business people. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you, Peter, for that. Rhoda, so the question was if you are the product owner of WhatsApp, which features will you monetize? And Peter said private setting, which is good, and video, but if he does video, you're just pushing people to another app. So what do you think, Rhoda, as we go for our break? Do you have any suggestions?
Um, no, really. Maybe I will monetize if you want to contact someone that is not on your contact list. At least that will reduce people contacting people anyhow.
Okay, that's a possibility, but that might also be invasion of privacy because if you want to contact someone that's not on your list and do it legitimately without invading privacy, then we have to think on that. So let me just add one and then we'll go for a break. So WhatsApp status is a very, very powerful thing. Imagine and look at how to monetize it. So you still leave it free, but let's say someone wants to extend their WhatsApp status for a week or 2 days. You know, it's usually a day, 24 hours, right? If if you want to do it for 48 hours, maybe you just pay like $1 or $2, $1, right? And extend it, or you want to extend it for 3 days. The reason why people are like going to pay is because some people use WhatsApp status for business, advertising their goods, their services. So they wouldn't mind paying something. I don't know if you agree with me. They wouldn't mind paying something to have it for just an extra amount of days, the same, rather than keep adding it daily. So that's my own suggestion. Why are we doing this exercise? We're just putting the heart of how a product owner thinks, what they want to do, and how, the kind of features they will suggest. That's that. So let's enjoy a 10-minute break, then we'll come back continue from there. Ready? Okay. All right, let's talk about the Scrum Master. So the Scrum Master is what we will refer to as project manager. But the Scrum Master is not like the traditional project manager. Scrum Master is a servant leader. So in a Scrum team, the person that plays the role of project manager is called Scrum Master, but they do it differently than traditional what we do in Waterfall. So first of all, the Scrum Master is after the success of the Scrum. The fact that Scrum is working is the direct responsibility of the Scrum Master, which means the Scrum Master must understand all the events and what happened in each event and should also know the time boxes of each event. Everything is timed in Scrum. Every event you do is timed, from the sprint itself to sprint planning to sprint review to sprint retrospective to daily Scrum. Everything has a time. So Scrum Master is in charge of that. Understanding and practicing agility, facilitating the Scrum events, ensuring engineering practices are followed. The Scrum Master is also responsible for removing impediments to the development team's progress. So what's an impediment? An impediment is a challenge that your team is facing that's obstructing their work. So let's say that your team members need access to a database. The Scrum Master, we can call that an impediment. The Scrum Master can help to restore that. The Scrum Master is also responsible for coaching the team into self-organizing and cross-functionality, which means it's your job as a Scrum Master to coach so that the team works by themselves. Nobody needs to ask questions. The team can self-organize. The team can work on tasks, distribute to themselves, and be accountable to themselves. So now the reason why the Scrum Master has to coach is because it's not a natural concept. Most teams have a leader, and it's the leader that tells everybody what to do. But in Agile, in Scrum, the team is self-organizing, which means they have to get to the point where they can direct themselves and manage their own work. Cross-functionality is a concept I will explain when we're talking about development team or developers because it covers that. So ensuring product owner knows how to arrange the product backlog to maximize value. So the Scrum Master can assist the product owner in managing the product backlog to what? Maximize value. Value means that the most important things are done first. First things first. So the Scrum Master can assist the product owner to arrange the product backlog. So let's look at the third member of the Scrum team, which is development team or developers. Now, development team or developers. Number one, they're self-organizing, which means nobody needs to show them how to do their work or what to do. They are cross-functional. Now, what does cross-functionality mean? It means everybody we need to build software is in that team. We don't need anybody outside the team. So the question is, okay, when it comes to cross-functionality, right, let's look at the people you need to build software. So you can start with a UI UX developer. What's UI UX? User interface, um, user experience developer. Then you can have a front end developer, back end developer. You can UI UX developer, front end, back end, and tester. So if you want to build software, these are the skills you need in a team. The development team needs to be cross-functional. What that means is that all the skills are in your team, but it doesn't mean that, let's say that you want to build software, you must have one of each person. No, it's possible that some of your team members have multiple skills. So you can have one person that has UI UX skills and is also a front-end developer, or you could have someone who's a front-end developer and also a back-end developer. You could have someone who's a full stack developer, which is front end, and you could have someone who's a tester and also a front end developer. What we're saying is that the cross section of your team must be cross functional. Does not necessarily mean you have one of each. One person can have multiple skills, but the total combination of all the skills are cross functional. So I hope we understand what I said. Having everybody you need to build software in a team means that the team is cross-functional. Then they have no other titles than developer. They have no other titles than developer. They have no sub-teams. Accountability belongs to the development team as a whole. So the team is accountable for the work, right? Which means if something is going wrong, everybody it's not John's fault, right? It's not John's fault that the software has not launched. It is our fault. Everybody's accountable. So that's how our development team should work. What are their responsibilities? Delivery of the product increment. A product increment could be a feature that or series of features. The quality of the product increment is their responsibility, building quality in, self-managing of their own work. So they are meant to organize and manage themselves. And finally, estimation of product backlog items. The developers are the ones responsible to estimate the amount of effort required to do the work. So that's the development team, or what you can also call developers. Now, the Scrum team is the development team should be between 3 to 9, but the Scrum team itself should be 10 or fewer, according to the Scrum guide. So 3 to 9, if it's less than 3, right, it will result in smaller productivity gains. If it's more than 9, right, there's too much coordination and generate too much complexity for an empirical process to manage. So you can see empiricism. So the moment there are more than 9 people, 9 developers, it's too much for a Scrum team. So that's just a guide. Now, this 9 is excluding the product owner and Scrum Master. Okay. So let's move on. So let's talk about the Scrum events, the sprint planning meeting, the daily Scrum, the sprint review, the sprint retrospective. So the sprint is a time box iteration of 1 month or less. So it could be 1 month or less, typically 2 weeks. Now, a sprint is the time you've fixed to accomplish some series of work. And in Scrum, 2 weeks is usually the most common timeline. Remember, you can actually decide. In First Bank in Nigeria, I know they use 3 weeks Scrum, 3 week sprint. They deliver every 3 weeks. And within that time, there should be something we call done. You can see this done is in inverted commas. There's a reason. Usable and potentially releasable product increment is created. Done means that the product increment or feature has passed through the definition of done. So anytime a feature or product increment has passed through definition of done, we say the item is done. So the question is, what's this definition of done? The definition of done is like a quality criteria, which means definition of done includes the list of things to test the product thoroughly. And if a feature or product increment has been tested using the definition of done standard, then we say that that feature is done. That's the word you use. Now, definition of done is also under transparency. Definition of done is also under transparency, which means everybody should know when a feature is done or not. So your definition of done, right, is the definition of done is what we're referring to when we say product increment is done. That's passed through the definition of done. It has met some quality criteria, and it is good to be deployed to the live environment to customers. Now look at the second point. All sprints should be of the same duration. I said this earlier. Don't start Scrum and say we're starting with 2 weeks. Next sprint is 3 weeks. Next sprint is 4 weeks. No, all sprints should be of the same duration. A new sprint immediately follows the completion of the previous one. Each sprint is started by a planning meeting. That means we have the sprint planning meeting. That's the meeting we're talking about. A new sprint, let me talk about the third one. A new sprint immediately follows the completion of the previous one. So let's say that you are on a 2-week sprint and it's the second week and we're completing the sprint, right? We're completing a sprint on Friday. Let's say 2-week sprint means Monday to Friday for 2 weeks. So you are ending the sprint on Friday. The next sprint will start on Monday the next week. So there's no break in sprint. We don't do 2-week sprint, then take 1 week break, then start 2 weeks. It's a continuous cycle of delivery, and it's in line with the first principle of continuous delivery of valuable software. Each sprint is started by a planning meeting. This is the sprint planning meeting. Let me just type it there so that you understand. Then a sprint will be cancelled if the sprint goal becomes obsolete. Only the product owner has the authority to cancel the sprint. No other person can stop a sprint apart from the product owner. No other person has the authority to cancel a sprint. Nobody can cancel a sprint apart from the product owner. Nobody has the authority to cancel the sprint apart from the product owner. That's it. But what do we mean by only when the sprint goal becomes obsolete? Now, that means that this 2 weeks time, that has been fixed, the only person that can stop it midway is the product owner. Scrum Master cannot stop the work. Developers cannot stop the work. Only the product owner can stop the work. But there's a condition if the sprint goal becomes obsolete. Now, what is the sprint goal? Sprint goal is one of the things you determine during sprint planning. And the goal is the overall idea you want to accomplish within the duration of the sprint. So let me give you an example of a sprint goal. So in the next sprint, we want our e-commerce website to have financial integration such that at the end of the sprint, users can be able to pay with MasterCard, Visa card, Verve, um, American Express, right? And that might be the goal of your next sprint. That means that for the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks, depending on your duration of sprint, that is the core focus of the work. So when you set a sprint goal, it's part of your sprint planning, then you now determine those features that meet up with your sprint goal. So I'm sure we now understand what a sprint goal is. But when the sprint goal becomes obsolete, so when what you are building in the next sprint is no longer viable or relevant, we can stop the sprint. Let me give an example. In Dubai, social media is not allowed. In fact, if you're in Dubai, they have their own social media type. If you want to call people in Dubai, unless they're using a VPN, you can't call them directly. There's something that will interfere the signal. So let's imagine that you are, and the reason for this is because of the Arab Spring that happened probably around between now and 10 years ago or more. Arab Spring, and that's where they use social media to spread, you know, it actually started in Egypt, and because they use social media to spread and it affect a lot of Arab countries. So Dubai banned social media. So you can't use WhatsApp, right? So imagine you're building a product like WhatsApp in Dubai and you're about creating the some features and you now hear that social media is banned in Dubai. That means the sprint goal of what you are building is now obsolete. So you can stop the sprint. But product owners know that they should not stop the sprint unless it's absolutely necessary. That's why the only reason is when the sprint goal becomes obsolete. Okay? When the sprint goal becomes obsolete. So during the sprint, no changes are accepted. No changes are accepted. The items that we've put in the what we have set as a sprint goal is not changed. The sprint goal is not changed. The quality should not decrease, and scope may be clarified and negotiated between the product owner and development team as more is learned. Let's talk about definition of done. Like I said, this is like your quality standard, and it's also under transparency, which means everybody should have access to definition of done and understand what your definition of done is. So what is the definition of done, right? It's a set of rules that help us to determine whether quality has really been achieved in the product we are building. So part of the definition of done is all features included in sprint are implemented. So we check whether all the features have been built and implemented. We check whether code meets general coding standard. We do functional tests. We check whether the features we built are working. So let's say someone built login feature, and then we test and we see that logging in is giving errors. Then functional test tells us that that feature is not working. User acceptance test agreed. Unit test and all tests agreed. And integration test of affected areas are passed. So that's your definition of done. That's your definition of done. So you can see that it's about testing and the types of tests you need to do on each feature that's been created makes your definition of done. Makes your definition of done. That's it. So when you've built a feature and you've done everything in the definition of done, and it has been successful or passed all the tests, you now say that that feature is done. And nobody can argue with you because definition of done is under transparency. That's what we're saying. Let's move on. Let me clear this. Now, let me talk about definition of done. One more thing is who sets it? Now, each organization that works with Scrum normally have their own definition of done. But if they don't have, then the Scrum team can create for the organization, or they can create one for the project they're working on. So that is definition of done. So let's talk about sprint planning. What happens in sprint planning? The work to be performed in the sprint is planned at the sprint planning meeting by the collaborative work of the entire Scrum team, which is product owner, Scrum master, and developers. During the sprint planning, Scrum team agrees on a sprint goal. Remember what I said about sprint goal? What are we going to achieve in the sprint? That defines what the upcoming sprint is supposed to achieve. The development team then provides an estimate of the effort required to complete the sprint. So it is during sprint planning that we also determine the estimate of effort. Then sprint planning is time boxed to a maximum of 8 hours for 1 month. So look at the time frame we're giving to sprint planning. Look at the time frame we're giving to sprint planning. 1 month. 8 hours for 1 month. Now the question is, what if sprint planning is 2 weeks? You know, we said we have the liberty to do 1 to 4 weeks. Most companies go for 2 weeks. What if your sprints are 2 weeks long? How long should you dedicate to sprint planning? Can someone tell me, please? If we have
16
so
hours.
no.
No,
So
if it's not 2 weeks,
yes, 8 hours for 1 month sprint. How many hours for 2 weeks sprint?
8 hours is
For
how
1
many
month?
hours? Okay, if you are going to work 2 weeks, if you're going to work 2 weeks, you have to work more hours. I'm going to be 16 hours.
No. So, sir, we're talking about sprint planning.
Mhm.
So if your sprint is going to be 4 weeks,
Oh, okay. Oh.
you say 8 hours. That means you block a whole day for sprint planning for the month. So if your sprint is 2 weeks, how much time should we block out for sprint planning? You get what I'm saying?
Oh, okay. If it's going to be 2 weeks, because working hours is actually supposed to be 8 days working hours now. So
8 hours. So if we use 8 hours for 4 weeks, we should use 4 hours for 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay.
Yes, that's it. It's a proportion. So if we are doing 2 weeks sprint, we should use 4 hours. That means, now, mark what I said, sir. Every event in Scrum has a time limit. It's not a must for them to consume all the time. If they can achieve it less than 4 hours or 8 hours, that's fine. But it should not exceed. So sprint planning is 8 hours for 1 month and 4 hours for 2 weeks. Now, remember what we said, that in sprint planning, right? In sprint planning, it is time boxed to a maximum of 8 hours for 1 month, right? I want to pick out something. In sprint planning, the team provides an estimate of the effort required to complete the sprint. Now, how do they do that? That's what we want to look at. The way Scrum team estimate work is by playing a game called planning poker. Can you imagine? Developers play games to determine how much work they should take or how much work each feature will take. And let me explain how they do it. So they play a game, and if you've ever played poker, right? Hopefully with fake money, unless you're a pro, don't use real money. Fake money poker, you can play it. Real money poker, you have to be an expert. And even at that, people lose money. So the reason why it's called planning poker is because it mimics poker game. So what happens is that in planning poker, people are given a set of cards and you can see them displayed here. Now, the card has a sequence called a Fibonacci sequence. What do I mean by Fibonacci? I'll show you now. And what is the Fibonacci sequence? Now look at it. So 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. 5 plus 8 is 13. 8 plus 13 should be 21. So this is not a pure Fibonacci card. This is called an adjusted, which means that they didn't follow through because it should be 8 plus 13, 21, 13 plus 21, 34, of course. So adjusted Fibonacci sequence. Now, what happens is that the product owner will describe a feature. Now, let's say you have 5 developers. Each of them will have the same set of cards. And based on what they feel it will take, the effort it will take, they'll select a number. So let's say you have 5 developers. It's possible the first one chooses 3. Now, they don't show the card until the last moment. If you've ever played poker or any card game, you wait to the last moment to show your card, not at the beginning. You don't show, in poker, if you show everybody your card, you're out of the game because you understand what I'm saying. So you show the card at the last moment. So when the feature is described, maybe one developer says 3, one says 5, another one says 5, another one says 5, another one says 8. So we've gotten our first estimate. We'll now ask the one that chose 3, why did you choose 3? And the one that chose 8, why did you choose 8? And we ask. Now, the whole essence of this is for developers to learn from each other based on their experience. And then you estimate again. So let's say the next time you estimate, all of them choose 5. We're going to say the level of work is based on 5 story points. That's what you're going to say. The level of work is made on 5 story points. So this is how developers estimate. They'll use cards, then they'll ask questions. They'll ask themselves questions. Why do you think this thing is a 3? Then one will say, the time I did this thing in another project, it took me a few steps because I knew a particular technique, and he might share it with them, right? The one that chose 8, they say, the last time I tried it, you guys ever experienced this issue before? Now, when they start rubbing minds together, you'll find out that you can re-estimate, and then you see that you continue until you get a consensus, which is a fixed number from all developers. So we now say that this is a 5 story point. Now, when we say this is a 5 story point, we can now say that any work similar to the work we just estimated will just come under 5 story points. And this is also called affinity estimating. So that's a strange way they estimate work. Let's look at what it says here. Planning poker is also called Scrum poker. Is a consensus-based technique for estimating, mostly used to estimate effort on relative size of development goals in software development. Planning poker should force people to think independently and propose their numbers simultaneously. It speeds up the estimation process by limiting the number of choices. Now, the reason we use Fibonacci sequence is to limit the number of cards people have. Because if the cards are too close together, it'll be difficult to reach a consensus. So what do I mean by it? If they're close together, imagine that we have 40 cards and each one starts with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What that means is that when it comes to estimating, if you have 40 cards for each person, one may choose 5, another one may choose 6, another one may choose 7, another one may choose 8, another one may choose 9. And this makes it difficult to reach a consensus. That's why as they are spread apart, right? As they are spread apart, it's easier to reach a consensus. Right. So that's why we use a Fibonacci sequence. So it's a game of cards. And what are they doing? They're estimating the features, how long it will take, or the level of effort to take to achieve the features. So one more thing is, why do they use story points? Why do they use story points? Why do they use story points? They use story points because they don't want to use time. So developers created an estimating method that you cannot connect to time. Why? Because when developers give people time, and you know software, code can misbehave sometimes. So they use story points to avoid estimating with time. Because if a developer tells you in 2 hours you'll be done, and they get into an issue, that 2 hours can turn to 8 hours. And then you find out the person that they gave the time frame. But you said 2 hours. You look at it, look at time. So developers ran away from time and they start using story points. It sounds funny, but that's true. That's what happened. So now, to determine the effort required to do work, they use story points. And the reason they use story points is because you cannot directly convert it to time. So if they say it is 8 story points, it's 8 story points. When are you going to finish? We'll finish it when we finish. But there's something I'm going to show you that will help us to know how to measure the story points. And that is called velocity. So let's look at the process. So the Scrum Master is the one coordinating the meeting. It chairs the meeting. It doesn't estimate. Scrum Master and Product Owner do not estimate because they're not the ones doing the work. The development team that estimates. The Product Owner provides a short overview of the feature, what the feature should do. The team is given opportunities to ask questions. Each individual lays a card face down. When they hear the feature and says, oh, this is like an 8, they'll keep their card, they'll select 8, they'll keep their cards face down. When it's time, they draw at the same time. Everyone calls their cards simultaneously by turn them over. People with high estimates and low estimates are given a soapbox to offer their justification for their estimate, and then discussion continues. Then you repeat the estimation process until a consensus is reached. You repeat the estimation process until a consensus is reached. Right? So that repetition is done so that we can learn. So if one doesn't agree with the other numbers, or why do you think your estimate, this estimate is, why is your estimate low or high? Yeah, yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. Sorry, I'm taking those back. When you
Yeah,
say maybe 5 story point or 8 story point, as the case may be,
yeah.
it's not time. What exactly is it?
It's made up.
Yeah, I understand. From this 5 story point, for instance, let's
Yeah,
say from the internal meeting,
yes.
what is it? Is it representing number of days as it is here,
Uh-huh.
or for
So that
instance, mm,
so that's
maybe weeks, month, as the case may be first. Let's say internally.
yes.
Mm,
So what I will say is that
mm,
story point is not an SI unit,
yes.
not a standard unit. That you can't say what I'm saying is so kilograms is an SI unit, which means 5 kilograms in Nigeria is the same thing as five
Yeah, I
kilograms.
understand. Yes.
In story point estimating, 5 story points is not in this project, is different from 5 story points in another project. So why do they use story points? They want to escape time. But how do they story point works with relative estimation? So if I see a feature that is 3 story points and I see one that is 5 story points, what
Mm,
I'm saying is that that 5 story point is almost twice the work of 3 story points. And 3 story point is like 2 story point compared to 3 story point is like the 2 story point is like 2/3 of the 3 story point.
yes. Almost 1.5. Yeah.
Yes. So that is how you can use it to compare. So if it takes me 2 hours to do a 3 story point walk, a 5 story point may take me like 4.5 hours. But it doesn't always work that way. The
Mm, no,
reason they did it is to escape time.
I
So that
understand. Let me just
yeah,
my what I want clarity about. I understand it's not an SI unit from you. Fine.
yeah,
I know it's not an SI unit, but it's a relative comparison.
exactly. That's
If
it.
it's that, what are we comparing it against? Even if it's not SI units, we are comparing it against something. Perhaps there's a standard we are comparing it against. That's what it means.
No.
Okay, if there is no standard, there may not be a defined standard. There should be at least a virtual standard, as we may want to call it, because I don't want to believe numbers is flying around that means nothing.
Yes.
So even
So
if you say
yeah.
3 story, maybe 3 story points. Okay, let's be practical. We want to construct a gas turbine, for it. Let's say a power plant, 2 megawatts, as the case may be, for instance.
Yeah.
We know 3 megawatts should take more time, more manpower to do it. In the absence that we have the same manpower, if you are constructing 1 megawatts in 2 days,
Mhm.
probably no, in a day, probably 3 megawatts should be within 3 days. We could
Yes.
short the time.
Yes.
If we are saying 3 story points, that was it. What are we comparing against something? No matter
Yes.
if it's on that, maybe we will say, okay, if it's maybe 1 megawatt is 1 story point,
Thank you. You're going
megawatt should not
well,
be
well
3 story point.
yes, we're going in the same
Yeah.
direction now.
If that is it, it also
Yes.
means no matter how loosely we use the word, we are also comparing it against. And that's what I'm saying. The time, okay, yeah. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
in Scrum,
Mhm.
the effort is not time related because they don't want to be put under pressure. So how we use it is okay, if 1 megawatt of power, let's say it's 1 story point, 2 megawatt is 2 story point, 3 megawatt is 3 story point. Any work in between, we can now compare. Okay, is this work related? Is it like the work done for 2 megawatt? Then we say, so any work afterwards that we're going to estimate, we compare it to the base that we've done. Now, but
Because,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
you know why I'm saying, because I'm looking at it from a client point of view.
yeah,
Yeah. Because if you come out with numbers like this,
yes,
and the customer or the clients ask, oh, I don't want to, if even if we are presenting, want to present three-story line,
yeah,
the primary idea really here is for you to, if they are developers, for them to actually get a job doing.
yes,
So
yes,
if you come and present something, says three-story line, three-story point, I
yes.
ask you, maybe I'm just one money back. I just want to invest in that. I ask you, what time are you looking at? You also say two sto three-story points. I say, okay, fine. I don't know. What's the meaning? Break it down for me.
Yeah.
I expect you to say, oh, normally like this kind of job, we can do it in 10 days, but that does not mean that 10 days is fixed. So if you
Ah,
start telling me is
mm.
three-story, I think I might just take my money and say, ah, let me walk away. That's why I'm
Okay.
asking you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
So first of all, because it's not time bound, it's not the kind of thing you tell your customer. It's for the team to manage their effort, not for external. Because, like you said, it's not bound based on time. But what determines what the team can do as actually when we do our release plan, right? Our release planning, let me go back to where we this release planning. So when we have a release plan, the release plan will show the features and functionality we should have over a period of time, maybe 3 months. Each iteration, when you do sprint, iteration is the same thing as sprint. So when we're doing sprint planning, it is in sprint planning we select the features, feature A to D, but in sprint planning we also determine the number of story points. Now this is where they got story points, user story points. So that means feature A, after playing planning poker, we can say is 5 story points, right? Then we just realized that feature B is also 5 story points, and feature C is 5 story points. And we realize that all the features are the same. That's not possible. That's not impossible, rather. So that means that this sprint is going to be 25 story points. It means that if we're doing work in other sprints, we should be targeting work of 25 story points per sprint. That is how it's used, so that we can know whether our team is underperforming or they're doing more than what we expect. So the story points are done to let you know the capacity of your team per time. And the reason why I really you know, there's something called velocity. When I know the total number of story points your team can achieve in an iteration or sprint, that is called velocity. So velocity is now what you now use. So if my velocity is 25 story points, which is the amount of features I can achieve, it means that the next sprint, when I'm estimating, if I have features and the estimate is 20 story points, 20, it tells me that we can do more work because our current velocity is 25. 25 is now our baseline. So if in the next sprint, we find out that the features, when we estimate, we add them up, there are 20 story points. It tells me that my team can do more work because the last sprint, we had the velocity of 25. if we estimate items and they add up to 20 story points, it means that my team can do more work. That is the concept behind this story point estimating. It's not used to tell customers how much time we can use to complete things. It's used to be able to measure the amount of workflow your team can do per time, right? And that's the velocity. So I like it's quite funny, right? Uh, in the way work is being estimated. But the moment you get velocity, then we can now use that as a benchmark to know whether our team is underperforming or overperforming. That's the goal of this estimating. I hope you understand what I'm saying. I hope you understand what I'm saying, sir. Are we good?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, so please, let's wrap up. Oh, I thought we'd be able to finish, and because I want to talk about the exam and also do a quiz so that we can look at our questions. So please, let's join the same time tomorrow. Because I have a class in the next 30 minutes. I wouldn't want to, I'd have just said, let's push it, but I wouldn't want to, and I need to take a break. So please, let's take a break. I know we're almost done. Next 30 minutes will be done. Yes. So please, let's do that. Hope it's okay with all of us. Hope it's okay. Hope it's okay. Can I get feedback?
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Yes, just one last one will be done. Okay, so let's wrap.